How do we get our partners on our side in this journey? The first thing I want to say about this is we're not getting our partners on our side, we're getting our partners on our children's side. This is really complex and nuanced, and the first thing I want to say about the partnerships we have when we're raising PDA children is that PDA doesn't just drop out of the sky. It comes from someone, somewhere. And I always say to families, it's really important to pay attention to the amount of resistance. If we have a partner who is a parent raising a PDA child with us, and they are really resistant to change, and they are resistant to coming on board with a new way of seeing things or doing things, it is really important to consider their potential for neurodivergence, specifically PDA, because sometimes we overlook that. Sometimes we see an adult and we think it's an adult being stubborn or difficult, but we know they love their children. We know that they are committed to the well-being of their children. Yet, if they are so resistant, if they are that resistant, then the chances of them being PDA as well are very likely. And then we might say things to ourselves like, yeah, but I didn't notice this stuff before about my partner. They weren't really resistant to things before, they were different. And what I would say to that is, we set up our lives intuitively, whether we know we're PDA or not, whether we know we're autistic or not, whether we know we're ADHD or not, we still are. The knowledge doesn't change the fact that we are. It's a neurobiological fact. We often intuitively mask through our lives, and then we set ourselves up to live in such a way that we're providing ourselves what we need: autonomy, freedom. In the same way that when our children come into the world, we may not know that they're autistic until they hit school years, because there's more pressure put on them, academic pressure, social pressure. And then we start seeing their challenges and watching them struggle because we've accommodated their needs intuitively as families when they're at home. When they go to school, it can be a completely different ballgame. That's when we start noticing things and we start asking questions about their neurobiology. Their parents can be the same. So we might be one person living this life that we know how to manage because it's within our control. But then when we have these little people, oh my goodness, what that can activate in us when they will not do as they are told. When we have this information in our heads about how it's supposed to be and we're autistic and it doesn't go to plan, the parenting book said when they're this age, they should be able to do this thing or they'll do this thing. Or those horrific programs on TV that judge parents and give them a serving and blame them for their children's challenges or their children's disability. We see things like that when we're autistic and go, this is how it's supposed to be. What are we supposed to do? Oh my gosh. And then, of course, when you are a neurodivergent adult and you've spent your life masking and you have this child in front of you who threatens to undo all of what you've worked for and put you in a position where you're going to be judged and criticised, that is threatening. I felt very threatened by that as a parent. Paying attention to the level of resistance. If we are constantly saying to our co-parent or our partner, oh, come and listen to this. This is great. Listen to this. This is our child. And they say, no, I've already heard it. Or they go, oh, I've just got to go outside and take the rubbish out. Or they avoid. They're avoiding, being the active word, demand avoiding. That's important to clock. It's important because asking them to read this thing about PDA or listen to this person speak or watch this video or why don't we try this with our child? Those are demands for our partner as well. What I often find the most helpful is allowing them to form a relationship with their child without us interfering. Now, sometimes I understand that might feel threatening and uncomfortable because what we might observe is that our partner is quite harsh on our child and still has neuronormative expectations of them. Sometimes I find that's in our presence, because our presence can be a demand as well. So for me as a PDAer, if I'm trying to do something and I know that there are people around, I feel pressure and I can't do the thing, or I feel like I'm being watched, and I feel anxiety and sometimes anger, sometimes irritation. And it's not conscious, it's just that demand pressure. So if our partner is being really hard on our child, we might think, if this is how they treat them in my presence, how are things going to be when I'm not here? But a lot of families are often surprised that when they back off and they allow this relationship, and whether that means you go away for a weekend or just go to another room and allow them more space and time for a little bit, they might be able to work things out, because sometimes it's the demand pressure, and they might not as well. That's a whole other kettle of fish, but we can't get our partners on our side. And I know that's probably not what people want to hear, but that question for me is the same as someone saying, how can I get my child to go back to school? Or how can I get my child to just go to bed and go to sleep? This is so complex and it runs so deep. We've just got to go beyond what we see and what we hear. The surface level behaviour doesn't just apply to our children, it applies to the entire family, because when you get to understand PDA, you'll be able to see it maybe in grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Yeah, it shows up.